On today's show, we talk Week 1, Geno's top 15 takes, and we'll look forward to next week, Week 2, college football. Stay with us.
And now, from Louisville, Kentucky, the horse capital of the world and sports junkies' finest, giving you wagering advice and sports analysis. It's On the Switch with your host, Geno G.
Welcome back, everybody, to On the Switch show. I'm your host, as always, Geno G. I always love to come in with high energy, lots of emotions, to be a little bit, maybe at sometimes erratic, but I have to talk about being here, living my entire life in Louisville, Kentucky. I have to talk about the voice of Churchill Downs, John Asher. Suddenly last week, John Asher passed away from a heart attack. He was 62 years old. The guy was the epitome of what an all-American guy is. He was sweet, kind, loving, a father, a husband, just an all-around great guy. I want to give you all my one fond memory of John Asher. It was actually the first time that I ever met John Asher in person, although I knew of him my entire life. In 2003, I met John Asher. From 2003 to 2007, my parents owned horses and raced all of them at Churchill Downs. In 2003, we purchased a horse named Fantastic Finish. She won a $30,000 claiming race in the month of May. When in the winner's circle, we were so excited. My entire family, we were, including both sets of grandparents, we had a group of like 25 or 30 of us. I mean, it was insane. We were all just going nuts. At that time, I was 15 years old. In the winner's circle, after we took the picture with Fantastic Finish, she went ahead and went to the barn. And then there was this heavier set guy that was coming around shaking hands with everybody. My dad said afterwards that the man who I'm speaking of, John Asher, said, "Is this y'all's first time in the winner's circle?" And my father said, "Yes, it is." And he goes, "Well, congratulations." And he came to me and he says, he shakes my hand. He says, "Son, congratulations and welcome to the family." That was the first time that I ever actually met John Asher. And it was interesting because you've always known John Asher as the voice, right? You hear his voice and you know distinctly exactly who it is. Then actually seeing him in person, this heavier set guy, just sweet as pie. Sweet as pie. I mean, the guy was absolutely amazing. And then, of course, yesterday, he was carried around for the last time 1 mile and 1/4 under the Twin Spires. And what is probably the most epic thing about the entire 1 mile and 1/4 was when he turned for home for the last time. They played My Kentucky Home. Sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. Because that was, as John Asher said, the best song that he's ever heard in his life. John Asher, a good man, a wonderful man, the voice of Churchill Downs. From everybody here at On the Switch, everybody related to On the Switch, we give our deepest condolences, our thoughts and our prayers to John Asher himself and his family and friends. When recapping Week 1 in college football, we went 10-5, which is good. We were plus 12.3 units, which is even better. So it seemed like all of our big bets were winners, which is great for everybody out there and all of our listeners. I know we've had a little bit of backlash from some Vandy fans that we perhaps maybe stirred the pot a little bit, but that's fine. We caused a little controversy and we can handle all that. Vandy did take care of business against Middle Tennessee State, and we promised that if perhaps they won on Saturday, that I would wear a shirt for our very first live show, and I'm going to live up to that. When it comes to my takes, I want to start off in Week 1 and do this every single week with Geno's top 15 takes. At number 15, I have Boston College. Boston College really beat a high-powered offense in UMass, 55-21. Anthony Brown at quarterback, which is great. He went 15 for 21 for 279 and 4 touchdowns. A.J. Dillon, who everybody knows, did his thing. He ran for 98 yards and had a receiving touchdown. I was more impressed with Boston College's defense, only giving up 7 points through 3 quarters, and I believe that the hype is real with Boston College. At number 14 was is one of the small upsets if you want to say, this past weekend, and that was Maryland, who beat Texas 34-29. In a weird game from the standpoint that there was so many delays in this game. Lightning, rain. I want to say 2 delays, if not 3 delays. Maryland did come out on top without their head coach, 34-29. Kasem Hill, as a freshman quarterback, went 17 for 29 for 222 yards and a touchdown. You notice that the Maryland's wide receiving core is super deep. And as a matter of fact, it's actually Maryland that caused 2 turnovers and had 7 tackles for loss against a Texas team that really should have dominated the line. I can tell here that Maryland could be some value. And speaking of value, let's talk about Shady Rays for just 1 second. Shady Rays, a sunglass company that's an independent company. They offer a 25% discount for military, both active and retired. They have the best lifetime craftsmanship warranty for every pair of sunglasses that you purchase. And as a matter of fact, when you purchase a pair of sunglasses, they donate 11 meals to fight hunger. I myself wear Shady Rays and won't wear another pair of sunglasses the rest of my life. Head over to shadyrays.com, use promo code SWITCH to get your pair today. Maryland looks like value heading forward. They dominated this game. I think this freshman quarterback is only going to get better as time goes on. That's number 14, Maryland. At 13, a team that we talked about heavily on the SEC podcast, and a team that I liked a lot, and that was Ole Miss. Ole Miss beat Texas Tech 47-27, and it was completely dominant. Their quarterback was fantastic. He went 22 for 32 for 336 and 2 touchdowns. Scotty Phillips was probably the biggest unknown in this game. He rushed for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns. We know that the wide receiving core for Ole Miss is just fantastic. And the biggest question when it came to Ole Miss, if they were going to win games, they have to get off the field. Well, as a matter of fact, they got off the field on third down 60% of the time, which is crazy against a team like Texas Tech. Ole Miss, number 13, they beat Texas Tech 47-27. Now at number 12, we're going to talk about 2 teams at 12 and 11 that didn't win, but were super impressive. We'll start at 12 with Appalachian State. They lost 45-38 to Penn State in overtime. They accumulated 451 yards of total offense against a defense that should have been stout. Maybe you question a little bit of Penn State, but Appalachian State moved the ball at will. I also like the fact that they didn't turn the ball over once, facing all of that pressure that Penn State put on. Minus, I do have to say, minus the fact in overtime when they throw an interception in the end zone. But although they throw an INT, it doesn't actually count towards the statistics in regulation. I like the fact that they went 6 for 16 on third down, 2 for 2 on fourth down. They held Penn State, and this is the key. They held Penn State to 10 halftime points. 10 halftime points. Appalachian State, a team that we will look towards the rest of the year as possible plays throughout the year. At 11, another team, like we said, lost, but was super impressive, and that was Utah State. Utah State lost 38-31 to Michigan State. Jordan Love was spectacular. He's 29 for 44 for 319. Although he didn't have a touchdown through the air and did throw 2 picks, he ran for so many third down conversions. I know he only rushed for 20-something yards total, but when he did run, he ran successfully on third down. Utah State's defense was fantastic, especially against a guy like L.J. Scott. L.J. Scott carried the ball 23 times for just 84 yards. They were able, with their front 7, to tackle him and contain him. Utah State, super impressive, my number 11 take. Number 10 is Oklahoma, and although Oklahoma could be higher, Oklahoma played FAU. FAU, coached by Lane Kiffin. Everybody thought perhaps this was Lane Kiffin's opportunity to present a case for all Power 5 conference teams that could perhaps look for a coach moving forward. This would be the game that he could kind of key on and say, hey, you see what I did to Oklahoma? How about this? The score is 63-14 Oklahoma. I don't think that's going to look good to anybody. I don't care who you are. Baker who? How about Kyler Murray? Kyler Murray, 9 for 11 for 209 and 2 touchdowns, only played a first half. That's it. He was absolutely fantastic. Oklahoma as a whole rushed 39 times for 316 yards and 5 touchdowns as a team. This team, super dangerous. Super dangerous. Number 10, Oklahoma. Number 9, is West Virginia. I will say this. Tennessee played with more energy than I have seen in probably the past decade. Under new coach Pruitt, he brought an energy to that team. They were electric. The crowd was fantastic. And they played with so much energy. I was super impressed with Tennessee, although West Virginia beat them 40-14. Greer did his thing. He was 25 for 34 for 429 yards and 5 touchdowns. Sills had 7 receptions for 140 and 2 touches. Pettaway, he carried the ball only 9 times, but it was for 56 yards, which I think is a positive moving forward for this team because they have to stay balanced. They can't depend on Greer to just chuck it 50 times. If they can get Pettaway to rush successfully, this team's going to be super dangerous. That's number 9, West Virginia. At 8, it's LSU. LSU beat Miami handily. I'm trying to think of another word. It was insane what they did to them being Miami defensively. They beat Miami 33-17, and really the 17 is pretty skewed because it was 33-7 for majority of the game. It was only late that Miami scored a couple late touchdowns. Nick Brissett ran for 125 yards on 22 carries, 2 touchdowns. I'm a little bit concerned with Burrow, and this is what we talked about when we talked about LSU. We didn't like LSU. We didn't like LSU in this game, although we didn't bet it. We didn't like LSU in this game. We thought Miami could handle whatever LSU put forward on the offensive side of the ball. Joe Burrow did just enough. He was not spectacular. He was not electric. The guy was just, whatever. Burrow needs to step up if they want to beat the likes of Alabama. The defense, though, unbelievable. We had questions about Rozier at quarterback for Miami, but the defense, serious this season. The defense also included a pick 6. You actually look at the special teams for LSU. The kicker, their field goal kicker, could be a vital key to the success of this team this season. He went 4 for 4 with field goals and hit a 54-yarder. A weapon like that in a game against Alabama that you know is going to be 10-7 or 13-7 or 13-10. This is a guy that you can lean on knowing that he's just automatic. LSU, number 8 on my top 15 takes. Number 7 is an interesting team just from the standpoint they were double-digit underdogs in both games, both this past weekend and the weekend before, and that's Hawaii. Hawaii beat Navy 59-41, and the reason why they are so high is because, like as I said, they were double-digit dogs in both games and whooped both teams, Colorado State and Navy. Listen, they have a firepower as an offense. It's unbelievable. It almost seems like the Timmy Chang years where they're just tossing it for 600 yards. As a matter of fact, Cole McDonald has thrown for 846 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2 games. No picks. Fred Holley, better than your average running back and probably won't get enough notice. He has 150 yards in 2 games. I know it's only 75 yards a game, but when you have an offense that's going to be pro pass, a guy like that running the ball who can get 80 yards a game, super, super important. As a matter of fact, when talking about the offense, it's more of the defense that I think everybody's surprised of. First half, they've been holding opponents to very, very small amounts of yards and points. This team could be the best Hawaii team. I know it's early, but this team could be the best Hawaii team since some of those 10-win seasons that they had just a decade ago. At number 6, crazy. Talk about Chip Kelly, right? That high-powered offense. And man, Chip Kelly, UCLA, guy, he's going to get all the guys and whatever. And Cincinnati comes in and says, hey, we're Cincinnati. 26-17 winners. Mitchell Warren II, he was the workhorse. 35 carries, 142 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He was literally all of the offense for Cincinnati, but it's all that they needed. They were winners 26-17. The defense, obviously, you have to give them 5 stars, right? Speaking of 5 stars, while you're listening, why don't you give us a 5-star rating? Leave us a comment. Follow us. Subscribe. All iOS, Android platforms. We're on all of them. Make sure to hit the heart so that way you can get an email when we drop a new podcast. But Cincinnati, 5 stars for the defense. I don't care if Chip Kelly's playing with a bunch of dogs, right? He should go out there and score 28 points on anybody. I don't care who it is. 17 points at home against Cincinnati. Bro, serious problems. Serious problems. But the good part, Cincinnati, impressive game 1. At number 5, I have Boise State. Boise State was a play against for a lot of touts. They were playing Troy. They beat them 56-20, and it was never close. Never close. 14-0 after the end of 1. 35-7 at halftime. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't until late fourth quarter that Troy scored again. Okay, so you know they were in against second string, third string, fourth string defense. Ripon was unbelievable. 20 for 28 for 305 and 4 touchdowns. I like the fact that Boise turned Troy over 4 times. Boise State, they get UConn at home, which could be an absolute shootout, right? High points. UConn was impressive to me, although they got absolutely stomped against UCF. But Boise State, if they can get past UConn, they go to Stillwater, Oklahoma against Oklahoma State, their star game of the schedule. Boise State, serious contender. Number 4, probably what is the biggest surprise to me, although they're not my number 1 take because I was unimpressed with their offense, but defensively, Virginia Tech comes in at number 4. I know I mentioned the defense. They had 5 sacks and 14 tackles for loss. Josh Jackson did his thing. 16 for 26 for 207 and 2 touchdowns. Didn't turn the ball over. Deshaun McCleese could be a serious running back in the ACC. He had 13 carries for 77 yards. As Virginia Tech, when they had Frank Beamer, right? The number 1 thing that they always were guaranteed to have was a legit special teams. And what do? Block a punt and return for a touchdown. Virginia Tech comes in at number 4. They beat Miami 24-3. They beat Florida State. Willie Taggart, that offense, horrible. Francois, terrible. They beat Florida State, not Miami, 24-3. At number 3, the most disappointed I was with Washington. And who comes in at number 3? Auburn. Auburn beat Washington 21-16. Cam Martin stole the show. The biggest question mark that I had on the SEC part when we talked about Auburn is how do you replace Kerryon Johnson? Well, hello, Cam Martin. 22 carries, 80 yards. I know it's not a lot, but I'm telling you, as the season progresses on, Washington State will have the best, or if not the best, one of the best front sevens in all of college football. So the fact that he was averaging nearly 4 yards a carry, serious, very, very serious. Good running back Cam Martin. Stidham, much improved. I was thoroughly impressed. He went 26 for 36 for 273 and a touchdown. Washington was not prepared for that up-tempo, fast-pace, no-huddle offense that Auburn ran. They were caught a little bit off guard, out of position on some plays. But Stidham, like I said, did his thing, and to me, has improved since last season, which was another question mark that we had. One thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to Auburn, though, is they held Washington to 102 yards rushing on 33 attempts. We talked about Washington and Myles Gaskin being a big, vital key to this offense. They held him completely in check. Auburn, number 3 on my hot takes this week. Number 2, and womp, womp. Harbaugh does it again. Notre Dame beats Michigan 24-17.
Harbaugh is so overrated.
You know, you say that, and it's it's hard to vouch for him, right? Because at some point you just got to produce, and it just seems like,
and the money they're paying him to produce, it's just, dude,
it's crazy because and we talked about this on the podcast.
You're Michigan.
I agree. And now you get Shea Patterson, and I'm thinking,
and you still can't do it. Unreal.
Again, one of the reasons why Notre Dame came in at number 2 is because of their defense, right? What they did to Shea Patterson, although I think the play calling for Michigan was a little bit questionable, I'm not making excuses, but Michigan did not have a run game at all. 0.
None.
Okay? And offensively, they played to whatever Wimbush's, his biggest strengths are getting outside, easy throws, having him RPO, run pass option. That's exactly what they did. They played to the guy that they have. Michigan did not do that. If Michigan did that, they would have put up 40 points on that defense. Unfortunately, as Michigan always does, or what under Harbaugh, what it seems like they always do, they just are in their own mind. They're in their own way. Let Shea Patterson do his thing, and I promise you, Michigan won't lose another game the rest of the season. Although I don't know if they can recover from this loss. It's brutal. It's hard. Now that you look at their schedule, and we talked about this on the Big Ten, their schedule is brutal. Although I think they can have a lot of success, I told everybody that they had to win this game and they could lose. They could be fortunate enough to lose one in the Big Ten and still get to the Big Ten championship, win the Big Ten championship, and go in, 12-1 and say, hey, we have a serious case. But now you look at how bad overall the Big Ten did this past week, or how ineffective the top teams played. This is going to be a tough sell. They need to go undefeated, win the Big Ten title, and hope Notre Dame stays relevant. That way they can use, we only lost by a touchdown. Michigan's in serious trouble, but not to go off on a tangent about Michigan and how disappointed I am in them.
That's my fault.
No. It's 100% true. Because as much as you want to give credit to everybody else, at some point you have to say, maybe some of it's like Michigan's not as good as what maybe I thought that they were.
I know this is a stretch, but I think perhaps he's the most overrated coach in college football.
That's a common theme that ever since they lost on Saturday, that's been a common take. And maybe part of it is because I don't want to buy it, but to me, the jury's still out. If he goes undefeated the rest of the season, which seems to be far-fetched, and I understand that, but there are things that he can do that would maybe justify this loss. But as far as Notre Dame, like I said, they played into the hands of Wimbush, right? As I said, their defense was unreal. Not only stopping the run, but stopping Shea Patterson, containing him within the pocket. He looked actually a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket, I think because they got so much pressure on him in a consistent basis. Notre Dame, serious threat. And when you look at the rest of their schedule, if you're buying Notre Dame, you look at the rest of their schedule and not much to be afraid of. I mean, you're talking about, maybe Florida State. And the shit that they put out on the field the other night? No. What about Stanford? It took them forever to get on track against San Diego State last Friday. The jury's still out. They play, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute, but they play USC at home this upcoming week. We'll find out real quick how good or bad some of these teams really are. But our number one take, Alabama. Okay, and I hate saying this. I know. As a Louisville fan, this one's hard to take in. I now understand what 99.9% of the SEC goes through on a weekly basis. Alabama and Tua as the quarterback.
Which, by the way, did you know that he has a brother in high school who's already committed to Alabama, who has an arm that's twice as good as Tua, and the kid's unreal.
Well, and I'll be honest, okay? Tua, I hate this comparison because Tua is a lot like Lamar Jackson in the way that he is best when he is out of the pocket doing his own thing. When you look at his stats, and I know he didn't have to do a whole lot, so, take it with a grain of salt. But he was 12 for 16 for 227, 2 touchdowns. A lot of that is when Louisville defensive backs were falling on their own feet, where I can throw that touchdown, So, again, you take it with a little bit of grain of salt, but the best plays that he made was when he was outside of the pocket. As long as they play to his strength, Alabama is serious. But what I think is more vital than anything, they lost so much on the defensive side of the ball. I was a little bit concerned with them being the number one team. A lot, you hear that saying, defense wins championships. Offense keeps you in games. I was a little bit concerned with their defense when playing some of the top dogs like Mississippi State, Auburn, these teams. I was a little bit concerned as to how Alabama might now Puma pass, and you heard all this hoopla and bullshit about how Louisville has a serious offense and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, Nick Saban puts Louisville on a pedestal, right? Louisville was like the New England Patriots, right, to Saban. He comes in and just whoops their ass. Absolutely just shellacks them. Puma pass looked horrible. The wide receiving core looked bleak.
He showed good moments. he was able to keep his composure in the pocket. He wasn't.
That's just who he is,
and that's basically about it, right?
That's just who he is. But Louisville didn't have a run game.
Right.
Puma Pass, you say, well, he's mobile. Where?
Couldn't tackle for shit. I will say that.
Where?
Oh my gosh. Just bounce right off of these Alabama players.
So then you look at the wide receiving core, and Des Fitzpatrick, the first thing that he said was, we can beat these guys one-on-one.
That was the first problem right there.
When? Where? Bro, I'm missing it. If you're saying you can beat these guys one-on-one, look, all love to Des Fitzpatrick, Seth Dawkins, Jalen Smith, and everybody, all the wide receiving core for Louisville. You can win out, and I will eat my words to the day I die. But when you say you can beat these guys one-on-one, bro, you all looked terrible out there. Horrible. And the only reason why you all got 14 points was because it was in garbage time. Period.
Right.
End of story. Alabama, super impressive. Not because they played Louisville or that Louisville is a top team, but the way that they went about their business and the way that the game was always in hand, right? I mean, the game was never in doubt from go. Offense, defense, special teams. How about this? Special teams returns a kickoff and returns a punt, but the punt had a penalty, which was completely out of the play, had no effect on the end result of that punt. They could have had a kick return, a punt return, and offensive touchdowns in that game. I mean, Alabama all the way across the board, super impressive. Louisville, it's going to be interesting. This week, I think you'll find out a lot. They play Indiana State. They should be able to run the score up, but if they don't,
it's Indiana State.
I know, but if you
don't find out that much.
I know. If you don't, though, now what do you think? I mean, does everybody, as a fan, do you go after Petrino's head? Do you say, hey, man, get the fuck out of here. Get out of here. We don't want you anymore. So I think this is a week that you need to put up 60, and if you don't, there's an issue.
And I think they do.
And they should.
Yeah.
They should. So that's my take from this past week. Looking forward, next week, a couple of key games. And we'll touch on in depth on these games in tomorrow's podcast. But I want to give you a little, maybe a brief look forward. In the SEC East, we picked South Carolina, right? And we said in week 2, this will be the game that decides the East. Georgia at South Carolina, high noon this Saturday. We'll talk about that game in depth. The big game at night is Clemson at Texas A&M. Texas A&M, they didn't play anybody in week 1, but the offense was super impressive. Mon looked great. Clemson did their thing this past week. They looked absolutely fantastic. And what's interesting about Texas A&M, they get an extra day of rest, an extra day to prepare for Clemson. That could be important in a way. I don't know if it affects the actual outcome, but they do get an extra day. Then we touched on this just a minute ago. USC at Stanford. Stanford, not the last thing that they were was impressive. And USC, it took a second half, a deep, big second half to get away from their opponent this week. That's two teams battling for the Pac-12. Then, how about some surprising games? Games that maybe you don't think of, but to me are going to be super, super important and could be some of our more profitable plays. How about Duke at Northwestern? How about that?
That'll be a big game.
Okay. Duke, I loved this past week, minus 13.5. We crushed that 5 units. At Northwestern, we bet that for 2 units and got that home. They won at Purdue, right? We talked about Rondell and what he was able to do for Purdue on the offensive side of the ball. Can Duke emulate that? That's the biggest key. Northwestern at home, I would probably give the advantage to the home team, but Duke has a serious offense. Iowa State at Iowa. It's always an interesting game, huge rivalry game. What's important about this, though, and we'll talk about this also in the next game, one of my last surprising games that I think could be a big moneymaker, big. Iowa State didn't play last week. Iowa did. Who does that give the advantage to? The team that played or the team that didn't play but now has tape on the team who did play? Which one has the advantage? It's in Iowa City. It's not in Ames. Kinnick Stadium, when it comes to Iowa State, that place will be rocking. Iowa State comes in as an underdog. We know what they've done in the past couple seasons as an underdog, especially on the road. The last game, and what could be the most profitable play this weekend, Colorado at Nebraska. Nebraska was supposed to play this past week, but Lightning, they canceled the game. Colorado played Colorado State at Colorado State and absolutely hammered them. We talked about Montez. He's kind of a nutcase, right? A guy that, is he talented? 100,000%. But sometimes can lose his cool a little bit. He goes on the road at Nebraska. Scott Frost, now this will be his first game. It's crazy to think Nebraska, Colorado, Scott Frost's offense with Montez in that offense who put up 45 or 48 against Colorado State. These two teams going at it. We can look at the over as a big play for us here at On the Switch. We'll talk about these games and so many more on tomorrow's show. But from Travis and I and everybody here at On the Switch, again, our condolences to John Asher and his family and friends. Congratulations to everybody who piggybacked us this week. We went 10-5 plus 12.3 units. And looking forward to this week. I think this week can be even more profitable than last week. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at OnTheSwitch1. We love you all as always and stay with us.